I was only a few hours away from marrying the man I believed was the love of my life when one impossible dream changed everything. My grandmother, who had passed away 3 years earlier, appeared in front of me looking more frightened than I had ever seen her. She grabbed my hands and gave me one warning that still echoes in my mind today. Cancel your wedding. Wake up before sunrise. Go to his mother's house. You will understand everything. Then she disappeared. I woke up at exactly 4:12 in the morning, my heart racing so hard I could barely breathe. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing more than stress or pre-wedding anxiety, but deep inside, I knew I could not ignore it. Looking back now, that dream saved my life. My name is Emma Collins, and until that morning, I thought I was living the happiest chapter of my life. In less than 8 hours, I was supposed to marry Mason Parker. We had been together for 4 years, and everyone around us believed we were the perfect couple. He was kind, successful, charming, and always knew exactly what to say. My parents loved him, my friends admired him, and I honestly believed I had found the man I would spend the rest of my life with. Every detail of our wedding had been planned for months, yet something inside me refused to let me enjoy the biggest day of my life. Instead of trying to fall back asleep, I quietly got dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove through the empty streets before the sun came up. The city was completely silent, and every mile I drove made me question whether I was making a terrible mistake. I kept hoping I would arrive and realize I had imagined everything. But the moment I turned into his mother's driveway, my stomach dropped. Mason's SUV was already parked outside, even though he had told me he would be staying with his best man until the ceremony. That was the first lie I uncovered. The front door was slightly open, something that immediately felt strange because his mother was always careful about locking everything. I quietly stepped inside and heard voices coming from the kitchen. At first, hearing Mason laugh made me smile because I thought I had worried for nothing. Then I heard his mother ask if he was absolutely sure about going through with the wedding. His answer destroyed every dream I had built over the last 4 years. Without any hesitation, Mason explained that once we were married, our finances would naturally become connected. He talked about my savings, my inheritance, and the lake house my grandmother had left me, as though they were already his. He admitted that marrying me was the easiest solution to his financial problems. His mother sounded uncomfortable and even called me a wonderful woman who did not deserve to be treated that way. Mason simply laughed and replied that love did not pay bills. He believed I trusted him enough to never question anything until it was far too late. Every word felt like another piece of my heart breaking. Somehow I managed to pull out my phone and secretly record the entire conversation. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it, but I knew no one would believe me without proof. Once I had enough, I quietly slipped back outside, climbed into my car, and cried as the sun slowly began to rise. Those were not tears for the wedding I was about to lose. They were tears for the future I thought I had. By the time I reached my parents' house, I had already made my decision. I would never marry Mason, but I refused to let him know that I had discovered the truth. Everyone was rushing around preparing for the ceremony while I forced myself to smile. My bridesmaids laughed, my mother hugged me, and my phone buzzed with a cheerful message from Mason saying he could not wait to call me his wife. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying with a simple message that made him believe everything was normal. While no one was paying attention, I stepped into another room and called my grandmother, longtime attorney. I asked him to make sure none of my property, savings, or inheritance could be transferred or combined with anyone. He immediately understood that something serious had happened and promised everything would be protected. The moment I ended that call, I felt stronger than I had all morning. Mason thought he had everything under control, but he had no idea what was coming. By noon, the ceremony began exactly as planned. Friends and family filled every seat, smiling as soft music played through the garden. Mason stood at the altar looking calm and confident. When our eyes met, he smiled the same smile that had once made me believe I was the luckiest woman in the world. Now all I could see was a man wearing a mask. The officiant welcomed everyone and began the ceremony. Everything felt strangely peaceful until he reached the familiar question, asking whether anyone had any reason the marriage should not take place. Without hesitation, I slowly raised my hand and said that I did. The entire garden fell silent. Mason's nervous smile quickly disappeared as he stared at me in complete disbelief. Before anyone could stop me, I connected my phone to the venue sound system and played the recording for every guest to hear. Mason's own voice echoed across the garden as he calmly explained his plan to marry me for my inheritance, and combine our finances before deciding what to do with me later. His mother voice followed, expressing guilt and admitting she hoped I would never discover the truth. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some people covered their mouths in shock while others stared directly at Mason, waiting for an explanation he could never give. He rushed toward me, insisting that I had misunderstood everything and that the recording lacked context. I calmly looked him in the eyes and asked him to explain his own words. For the first time since I had known him, he had absolutely nothing to say. His silence said more than any excuse ever could. I looked at everyone who had gathered to celebrate our future and quietly said that marriage should be built on honesty, respect, and genuine love, never on lies or financial manipulation. Then I handed the microphone back to the stunned officiant, turned around, and walked away without looking back. Every step away from that altar felt like another step toward freedom. As I reached the parking lot, someone called my name. It was my grandmother's closest friend, a woman who had known me since I was a little girl. She walked over with tears in her eyes and handed me a small sealed envelope that my grandmother had asked her to keep years earlier. Inside was a handwritten note that read, "If anyone ever asks you to ignore your instincts just to keep the peace, always trust yourself instead. A loving heart should never require you to silence your own." I held that note close to my chest and finally understood something important. Whether my grandmother had truly visited me in that dream, or whether it was simply her wisdom guiding me one last time, no longer mattered. Somehow, she had protected me exactly when I needed her most. 6 months later, I returned to the lake house that Mason had planned to take from me. Instead of selling it, I restored it room by room, turning it into a place filled with peace instead of painful memories. Mason tried contacting me several times, but I never answered. Some doors are meant to stay closed forever, no matter how hard someone knocks. People still ask if I regret walking away on my wedding day. I always smile because I know the truth. I did not lose the future I wanted. I escaped the future that would have destroyed me. Sometimes the greatest gift you ever receive is not the ring waiting for you at the altar. Sometimes it is the truth that finds you just before you say yes, giving you the courage to choose yourself instead.